right, folks. Welcome to Getting Started with Sky UX.
Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So I just want to welcome everyone. It looks like those attendance numbers are going up, which is great. But we are going to get started. So I'm Lizzie Schaffer. I'm the GM of Blackbaud Social Good Startup Program, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, Getting Started with Sky UX Components. Joining me today is John White, Principal Software Engineer here at Blackbaud, a colleague of mine. Friendly reminder before we get started to please take the very quick survey that I will launch right at the end of this session. The top 3 highest rated sessions from all of BB Dev Days will get a golden ticket to BBCon in Seattle in September. So it's really important that you give us your feedback and let us know how much you love John's session so that we can make sure that he joins us in Seattle in September. So with that, I'm going to hang out in the chat. If anyone has questions, I will monitor those and make sure that John has time to see them. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to John to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Lizzie. So welcome to Getting Started with Sky UX. My name is John White, as Lizzie said. I'm a principal software engineer on the Sky UX team at Blackbaud. So Sky UX is used internally at Blackbaud for our product development, and it's offered as an open source project for our partners. And today we're going to walk through building a single page application, a spa using Sky UX. So my family recently adopted a rescue dog. His name is Snoopy. He's a good boy. So today we're going to build a spa called Barkback. It's going to be an animal rescue service. That's kind of the scenario we're going to work with. All right. So we'll start by talking through Sky UX, how it compares to frameworks like React and Vue. We'll initialize an app with Sky UX. We'll add a data service, create a front-end interface for that data, and then we'll finish by adding an action hub to the site. All right, so we're going to use StackBlitz for this. It's a browser-based web development environment. If you click the GitHub link, or I can post a link in the chat that'll go directly to StackBlitz, where you can create the project. All right, and then let me share my screen and you can kind of follow along. Switching over. There we go. All right, and then let me zoom in on that. Cool. Okay, so this is our Barkback application. And if you click that StackBlitz link, it'll show you the initial project in StackBlitz. But if you're in the GitHub, you can see the steps it took to just set that up. This is just an empty Angular application that has Sky UX installed. So I used the Angular CLI to create the project. I added ESLint and Prettier as just an extra tooling to kind of help prevent bugs and help with code formatting. I added Sky UX packages, which is our it's kind of a meta package that handles updates for other packages in Sky UX. And then it also adds a bunch of other NPM packages. And this is just really for StackBlitz that we're doing this up front. StackBlitz can take a minute to load sometimes. And so just by doing it up front, you kind of take the hit early, and StackBlitz should be more performant on subsequent loads. All right. And then I created a welcome to Sky UX page and just committed that. So that's the steps. And then here's what we got with that. So this is the Angular application. At the top level, you'll see a few configuration files. Angular uses a folder structure convention. And here is that welcome to Sky UX component. And so you can see here, the welcome to Sky UX template is just an HTML file, and it's going to have these custom tags, and those are Angular components. And So that's the Sky Alert component. And then if you switch from warning to info, you can see the changes get reloaded right away. Is that better? Is the sound better for folks having sound problems? Let me know in the chat, please. Okay. Um, all right. So SkyUX is that better? Great. Okay. Thank you. SkyUX is both a design language as well as setup components. It does have style sheets. And so if you did want to pull SkyUX style sheets into another language, um, those are pulled in to Angular through the Angular JSON file. And it's these specific CSS style sheets that come through the SkyUX theme package. And those are ones you could pull into another project if you wanted to. But overall, SkyUX components are Angular components. Angular is a front-end component framework similar to React or Vue or Svelte. It uses class-based components. It relies on TypeScript decorators. And historically, it has used RxJS for reactivity, the kind of what happens when data changes and how it notifies of data changes. More recent Angular has supported signals, and that'll be more familiar to Vue and Svelte developers. Like I talked about, Angular has this convention for a folder structure, and it does support single file components if you did want to use single file components. It has a dependency injection system for delegating services within a SPA. Services provide data handling and integration between components. One example of a service would be the HTTP client. So, like, instead of calling fetch from an individual component, Angular provides a service where you could hook into that HTTP client and add additional authentication headers or additional logging around those HTTP calls if that's something you wanted to do. If you're interested in a deeper comparison between front-end frameworks, check out the book by Corbin Crutchley, the Framework Field Guide, and that delves into more side-by-side comparisons between different frameworks, including Angular. But today we're working in Angular. All right, so the project is set up. It has ESLint, it has Prettier. And if we switch to the next step, creating an HTTP service, rather than watching me type that out, I'll just show the code and talk through it. So for that HTTP service step, it's adding two pieces. The data service is just going to hold the data within the application. So this is kind of our state for the application. And then we have our persistence service. And this is what's going to load the data initially. And it's what's going to save the data. In this case, it's going to save to session storage within the browser rather than to a backend database. This is purely just for a demonstration. You wouldn't actually write your application. So a real application would be doing an HTTP call to a backend function and writing to a table. And that would involve additional layers of authentication and pieces we're just not going to do today. So this data service is going to, so this persistent service is going to load into the data service and just initialize the data. initialize is just going to load this static JSON file. And I put that in the assets directory down here. And it really is just a JSON file, but this represents the response from a web service that would have your data coming back. And then we can wire that into our application. Another piece we've added here is the app UI config. This we're going to use this to provide sticky settings within the application. This implements a pattern we use called SkyUX config, SkyUX UI config service. And it just, so if someone goes to a data view and they add filters or sort columns and that kind of thing, and then go away, when they come back, you want those settings to persist. And so that just captures those settings. In this case, again, session storage in the browser, and it'll just, retrieve them when you come back to the page. So we'll get into that. And then for each of these services, Angular uses Karma Jasmine for testing. And so each service has a set of tests that go along with it. And that's an important part of maintaining any good application, is to write tests and be able to certify that the system works the way you want it to. And as you make changes to your application, you want to be able to certify that those changes didn't break previous expectations. All right. Let's switch into something more with SkyUX components. So if we're going to create a view of our data, let's switch to that third step. So we're going to create this data view. The data view pulls up a record and just shows a couple pages. In this design, we're planning to use this description list component several times wrapped in a box. And that's two separate SkyUX components put together. So we're going to show how to take a pattern like this and create your own reusable components that comprise the two SkyUX components together. So to do that, we're going to go into our animal profiles view, and we've created this description list component. This component is a skybox that wraps a sky description list, and then it loops over a set of items, and it shows a description list. So pretty straightforward. In Angular, to have this list of items and to pull in these other components, it's handled in the TypeScript file that goes along with the component. And this TypeScript file has the list of items. And in this case, it's going to get them as content children from this other component we've created. So we have a list item component. It has two inputs, a term and a description. And by putting a list of list items within our list component, that's how we're going to draw this box and description list over here. So we can see that by clicking into the view component. This is this represents this full page here. Up top, we have a if statement that says if we have data. And then if we do have data, we're going to use our Sky Fluid Grid to show a heading, put the avatar, so the avatar. And that's either going to pull an image in, or avatar falls back to showing initials. And then we're going to show an H2 of the name of the animal. Badger here, he's a good boy. And we're going to show a Sky Alert if the animal needs attention. And all animals need attention, right? So Badger here, you want some attention. And then going down, we're going to use that description list component we created earlier. So here we're pulling in the description list. We have our list items. And we're wrapping that inside of a sky column within our fluid grid here. We have an optional field called bio. So we have an if statement around that. And if we have a bio, we're going to show a skybox and just show the bio wrapped in a pre-tag. And that's just, you could do markdown or some of the rendering here. In this case, we're just showing, it's a plain text field and we're just showing with line breaks. All right. And then further on down, again, we're using our app description list. And here we have some metadata about this record. So it's when it was created, when it was last updated, and format it using this pipe to the sky date pipe, which takes a JavaScript date object and formats the output so that it works with the locality. And that's our full view. But then else, so this is if we don't have data, if the data up top came back as undefined, then we're going to show an error message. This error message could be more specific, but it really just handles the case where the ID or whatever URL they came to doesn't exist. And it's just going to show the broken message. Here you could also have additional calls to action, what to do to remedy the situation. But this is just a basic error. All right. And then another thing here, we're showing age. Age is calculated, right? So it's relative to today's date. And the data service has birthday. So up here, where we did age, we wrap age in a function. So we pass the birthday in, and we get a string out. You can call functions from within a template. You could also write your own pipe to do this calculation for you. And the result would be similar. The pipe is useful if you're pulling in the pipe from another library. The function call works if you're just doing a local set of logic. That's not necessarily something you need to reuse as much. All right. I'm going to keep moving on. Please put any questions in the chat if you'd like me to pause or slow down or review anything. After the view, we're going to create a form. And this, there's a lot of considerations when you're building an application with a form. So again, we're showing Badger as a view record, but then we have this edit button. And we've created this whole view page that has additional navigation around it up top. The same view component we had in the previous previous step. But we've added this view page component. And then that has a link to an edit button. And when you click the edit button, it'll open a modal dialog to edit the record. And this is where you can make changes. Say, good boy. And update the record here. And that'll update the age stays the same, obviously, but we added a bio, our last updated date, and we took away the needs attention. And bring it right back. All right. So when we build an edit form like that, we need to make considerations around accessibility. So people with a visual impairment or cognitive impairment where they would like to interact with the page through a text-to-speech or other assistive technologies, they're going to use a screen reader. And So each of these field inputs has accessibility text that talks about what the field is, what additional information needs to happen to complete this, any validation errors. And so if we clear that out, we have a message that says name is required. And that's something that a screen reader also needs to call out. And so SkyUX handles the additional markup it takes to wire that up in a way that screen readers can interpret it. And it helps meet those accessibility requirements and work with people who have different needs. Another thing around forms and accessibility and all components really is testing. So when you create an Angular component, Angular automatically generates tests to go with each component just by running the generator. In this case, so the Vue component has a set of tests that are pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of branching logic in the component, and so it doesn't necessarily need as much testing. The Vue page introduces the navigation, and so in order to do testing around it, you need to provide additional testing hooks, and that's something Angular provides out of the box. So it's these location mocks and a router, so that in the testing scenario, it has this kind of hypothetical, what would it look like if this page was in an application? But this is a unit test, and so you're able to test this component in isolation. So that sets up the test, and then it's able to, when you run this test, it'll load the component automatically. And we'll do that in a second. I also want to review the edit component. This edit component testing has a few more pieces involved. So it plugs into the data service. And so there's a few things you need to set up in order to test it. So I have this setup test function where I can pass in different parameters and to build a scenario around for the test, right? And in this case, I want the data service to have value or not. And so that's, we're creating a mock data service. It also needs to know about the location and routes. And then we're going to create it in a couple different ways, right? So we're going to create the case where there's, it's a new record. There's no data that it's pulling in. And we're just going to validate that it knows what to do, that it shows the right labels, and make assertions around that. We're going to test that the cancel button doesn't save. So this code goes and validates that the modal is open, that the sky wait completed, but then we're able to click the cancel button. And when that happens, the data service set is not called. So we don't save the data back. That's important, right? This test runs through what happens if the data is not valid. We don't want to necessarily save invalid data. So we have certain rules about what fields are required and what format they need to be. And so in this case, if we create a record and hit submit without filling in all the fields, it's going to not call the set function. And that's just another way to prove that. It should load a record. So not a new record, but an existing record. We're going to set up the test with that record as if it exists. We're going to try to edit it. We're going to confirm that it loaded, that we're able to edit it and save it, and that it does call through to the save function. We're going to test the scenario where there's a missing record. Somehow they clicked an edit button on a record that doesn't exist anymore. And this last one should be accessible. This is important. This is a test that SkyUX provides where we use the Xcore library to run accessibility tests on components and make sure that any component meets the acceptable levels of additional labels and text that screen readers need, as well as things like contrast for low visibility or color blindness to make sure that the components work for people of different abilities. All right. And so with all those tests, we can go run those right now. So down on the terminal here, I'm going to stop running the application and I'm going to run npm test. And that's going to build the application and hand it off to the test suite that Angular provides. And let's see. Wait for it to come up. There it is. Okay. So here it uses a web browser to run these tests, which makes sense. And that's one thing that's different than something like Jest and React. Jest uses a mock browser, which has advantages for performance, but sometimes the fake browser is not as good as the real browser, right? So Angular uses real browsers for testing and runs through all the tests and randomizes, and then provides this nice report. If there were errors, it would be able to show you the errors. The debug page would let you kind of step through the errors, do console logging or additional breakpoints in the browser around those errors. But in this case, all our tests pass. Great success. Love it. All right. So we've built our view. We've built our edit screen. Now we're going to build a data grid. And so let's switch to that. All right. So when I switch branches, you'll notice it did pick up the changes and run, sorry, run an additional set of tests against not just the old stuff, but now it has the new stuff as well. And so if you go over here, we have a new list component. The list will pull in a, we're going to use Sky Page with the list layout. It's going to have a wait to know when the data is ready. It's going to have a heading and a content. Let me stop this. And okay. It's going to have a data manager with a toolbar for managing the data. It's going to have one data view, and it's going to use AG grid inside it. AG grid is something, if you're using React, you might be familiar with, like the tan stack. AG grid is one of the tan stack components, but in this case, it's for Angular and not React. So adding that list view, we can start the application back up and go take a look at that. All right, so now we have a list view. We have a list of all the dogs. And so to pull some pieces together, each dog, you can click on it. And we're using a flyout component to put the view over here. And we're also using a view page to show that whole view on its own page. So that reuses the view and adds navigation at the top. And it has a dedicated URL for that record, which can be useful depending on, if you want to be able to come back to a certain record or make links to it directly. Either way, you can edit it, and by calling our edit button here. And in that case, so because we call edit from two different contexts, we've created this edit service. Edit service uses the Sky modal service internally. And it just has one function that will just open a modal with the passing in the ID as the record. By breaking that out into its own thing, every time you want to have an edit button, you don't necessarily have to have the Sky modal service. And that's not something when you start adding a few services together, you want to be able to kind of lump them together and not necessarily re-implement the same thing every time, right? So this just creates a reusable service that we can call wherever we want the edit function. And so we also have this drop down where we have a view, edit, and delete. We implement the drop down in the list component. Up at the top, we've created a few ng templates. This is Angular's ability to have kind of sub templates or micro interactions you can put within another template. So this ng template has a handle, and we're able to pass that along to use it within the grid. So here we have the Sky dropdown and each of the actions within the dropdown. And then I have a callback that happens when you click that dropdown item. So if you come over here, hit delete, it's going to prompt you to confirm that you want to delete this record. This is the SkyUX delete confirmation interface. And so you can either delete it or cancel. I don't want to delete Badger. Maybe we could delete Lola. And then she's gone. All right, that's that interaction. This grid has a lot of built-in interactions. You can drag columns around. You can sort columns. Prioritize older dogs by birthday. You can show and hide columns, so you don't need gender or breed. You're just looking for names of older dogs. You can kind of simplify the look like that. And that's all functionality that's out of the box for this Sky data grid component. All right. So we've gone through, we've created the view, an edit, a list, and we can look at one thing real fast. We talked about the SkyUX UI config service that has the sticky settings. So this, when you come back to this view, birthday is sorted, and the columns are showing only the ones you chose. So those are settings that are persisted through the UI config service. All right. Let's see. We've done the data grid. Now let's go on to the Action Hub. And this will kind of tie it all together. So Action Hub is a pattern that we use for calling out, what actions to take next when you're managing data sets, or, it's kind of creates a starting point for an application. So this is a very basic Action Hub. So there's only one item here. You could have several different ways of calling out different records, that kind of thing. And then this also brings back our Welcome to SkyUX component that we had at the beginning, showing a static content down here as kind of reference, but you could also pull in other content below this each extension box. With this whole pattern becomes an Action Hub. And then you can click in here to get to your list. Again, the settings are persisted, and go back out to the Action Hub. And that's the idea there. All right. So we've gone through a lot, and we had to pretty much gloss over a lot, so it's to kind of get through it in the time. The steps are all here. If you want to see each of the code changes that go into any specific step, you're welcome to take a look. So, to create the edit form, involves 10 files. Here's where we create the form as a template. Um, Angular creates a style sheet file. In this case, we didn't actually use it for this component. You don't necessarily need to keep those. This is the test for the edit component. And you're welcome to go back and review this at another time. The actual TypeScript for the component. The TypeScript is what references the HTML file, the CSS file, and kind of pulls it all together. So this is where Angular starts when it's compiling things. It will import modules that are referenced in this component. So when we use other SkyUX components, we're going to need to import those into this edit component, right? And then here's Form Builder is an Angular utility for managing the interaction of forms, and it kind of provides that reactivity within forms for validation. We're going to either edit an existing file, existing record, or create a new one. In this case, we're using a random UUID for an ID. You could use a number. If you were actually doing a backend system, you wouldn't necessarily trust the client ID generation, but this is just for demo purposes. And then we have a function to save and a function to cancel. We have our service. It's very small, and so it doesn't need much testing. We brought in our view page, and you can see this provides additional navigation at the top, and then pulls in our view. In this case, it's using this component portal as part of the Angular CDK. And that's just a way of pulling in a component and doing it in a way that matches the way it would work in the flyout. So we need this hierarchy, we need the dependency injector to just pass along the ID, and then the view component can pick that up and load that record. All right. So those comparisons are available for each of the steps. We're getting towards the end of the session. Did anybody have any questions about things or anything you want me to follow up on? So I put a set of next steps down here. If you're looking for more code examples and documentation, please check out the SkyUX documentation site. If your application needs to support additional languages, check out Angular's localization support. Angular has a write-up on how to deploy an Angular application. That will depend on your environment. There are additional considerations depending on what backend system you're kind of integrating with. And then when SkyUX does come out with new releases, please use ng update to run those releases. Angular has a great reputation for creating backwards compatible systems. And when they make a change that's not necessarily backwards compatible, they provide code modifications, which they call schematics, that go through and update your code to make it work with the newer versions. And SkyUX also provides those with our SkyUX components. And that all works through running ng update to update packages.
All right. Well, if we are about wrapped up, then I'm going to launch this survey here. Friendly reminder for everybody to please take 10 seconds to take it. Thank you, John, for the amazing presentation today. If anyone has questions or wants more information, you can click that People tab at the top and reach out to John directly. And hope you are all enjoying BB Dev Days. We will see you guys in the next session and all day tomorrow. Thanks so much.